Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor. As you know, this is the show that tells the stories behind the stories, and you get to meet the people who write the books. And today we are going to meet none other than the Honourable Premier Dr. Andrew Furey. And welcome to Let's Get Writing.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, for the sake of this show, can we be a little more informal? Can I call you Andrew?
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to have you here. And I actually had not read the book, and I have read the book now. And I've learned a whole lot about you, and I'm sure things that people don't know of, maybe not everyone knows about what you have done. And it's been a pretty amazing journey. Andrew, when this all started, which was back, you were sitting at home.
Yep.
And you were watching TV.
Yeah.
And that was long before the book was written. But how did this whole journey begin, the hope in the balance?
Well, the journey really to the book began with the inception and the concept of Team Broken Earth, which started out, sounds like Seinfeld, but started out to be nothing, really. It started out just as a real emotional response to the earthquake in Haiti, in Port-au-Prince in 2010. And as you suggest, I was actually in the hockey dressing room playing a regular skate, and some of the guys came in and said, "Did you hear about this tragedy in Port-au-Prince? It sounds like they're going to need surgeons." And didn't think much of it, and then got back in the car after the game was over and driving back, listening to some of the radio coverage, and then of course sat home and turned on the TV. And different than some of the other natural disasters that have occurred around the world, because of Haiti's proximity to the continental US and Canada, there's many journalists already on the ground. And so instead of seeing a map of Haiti in the corner with a dot and some journalist on the phone, you're seeing very much live pictures come into your living room very quickly about the devastation after that earthquake. And it just struck me immediately that, people were going to die of their abdominal injuries. They were going to die, unfortunately, of their head injuries, but they weren't necessarily going to die of their broken leg or their broken arm. And that's what I do for a living. That's what I wanted to be able to help. So I put up my hand to help with a group of doctors and surgeons who were going down with a team out of Baltimore, Maryland, which I just finished my surgical training in. And so that's how really the journey of Broken Earth began. I'd like to think that the journey of instilling hope and public service in me began with my dad and my family story, and that's why, and frankly, the greater story of Newfoundland and Labrador and where we belong in the world, and our sense of place and our sense of community, and trying to give back, which I think distinguishes us from the rest of Canada. No offense to anyone who's listening, but I think all three of those elements really, by themselves and collectively, were the start of the book.
And you did bring it together, because one of the things I wanted to ask you about was your family, the whole way when we look at your father and how he was brought up, and the different things that you did around the dinner table. It reminded me of almost Newfoundland the way it was. Now everybody's on an iPad, but out of that came sort of a sense of understanding community and even understanding the role that government can play.
Absolutely. So my dad grew up in Mount Cashel. His mother left a broken marriage kind of in the middle of the night, literally, and moved 8 children into St. John's, and parked him in Mount Cashel when he was 5 or 6 years old. So the whole family grew up in between Belvedere, which was the girls' orphanage, and Mount Cashel, which of course is the infamous boys' orphanage that existed. But they managed to stay together, and they had as they grew together, there was a story and narrative that was woven amongst all of them. They had some call to public service, and we didn't really know where that came from, but my father then began a teaching career with the attempts to educate and give back to the community, and then began a legal career, and then subsequently became a senator and the Speaker of the Senate. And so his journey, that overarching from the cold, what had to be cold, troubling walls of Mount Cashel to the chair of the Speaker of the Senate, was always inspiring to me to see where he had come from even as a kid, and see where he had started and where he was growing to and going beyond. All not out of a pursuit of money or fame, but out of a pursuit to try to make things better in the community and in the province and in the country as a whole. And so that really sparked a lot of political debate at the dinner table, because there was, there's well-deserved degree of skepticism and about governments in general and trust in them, but they are so fundamental to advancing who we are as citizens in society that oftentimes you get lost in whatever the issue of the day is, whether that be a big issue like Muskrat Falls or a smaller one like a road being paved. And he really instilled in me that you can't let the cynicism take over the beauty and the majesty that is these institutions. They deserve to be protected. They deserve to be utilized in the right way so that we can advance ideas and we can truly make changes, not just in people's lives, but in how society evolves, as it should, to be more progressive, more open, and more developed. And there was many discussions at the dinner table about specific policies, but the one thing that I always took is that he would never tolerate, and it wouldn't tolerate it from me, wouldn't tolerate it from guests, wouldn't tolerate it from other relatives, is that degree of cynicism. And he always challenged people. Well, if you don't, what's stopping you from stepping up? Like if you don't have, you sound like you have marvelous conviction. Now where's your courage? Because the system is right there, the vehicle is right there for you to change it all.
Well, and you stepped up. But
Yeah.
at that time, didn't he tell you, were you crazy?
Yes. A lot of people wonder why I did this career and why I made a pause in my other career and took on this career. And if you look at, 3 years ago, or three and a half years ago now, people forget where we were. But I put my hand up to potentially be leader of the Liberal Party and subsequently Premier before COVID-19 hit. And I saw the challenges that existed for the province. At the time, former Premier Ball had written the Prime Minister and said, hey, we can't borrow any money. We can't pay teachers, we can't pay doctors, we can't pay nurses. We had the looming debt of Muskrat Falls and how punishing that was going to be on families, on individuals, and on businesses, frankly, because that electricity rate doubling would have been passed on to every single entity of society. But I also saw those significant challenges as opportunities to really step up and try to make a difference. I'd like to believe that anyone can lead in good times. The test of a true sailor is how you navigate a ship in a storm. And I think that it was stepping up, being able to contribute, not for myself, but so that my family and my children have a vision and a path to a sustainable future here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I think that that's what everyone at home who's watching from Newfoundland and Labrador wants, is a steady hand on the wheel and a path and a vision, a strategic one, to the future. And in that short period of time, we managed to deal with Muskrat Falls. Then all of a sudden the pandemic was thrust upon us. We led, I think, some of the best pandemic strategy. I know there was conflict and issues, and I can appreciate that, but at the time it's live decision making, and I think we looked at the evidence. We made the best decisions, and Newfoundland and Labrador fared a little bit better than everywhere else probably in the world with respect to the pandemic. And then we tackled the economic crisis. We've managed to support our oil and gas industry while developing new industries in terms of green, renewable energy sources that the whole world is going to need. And we're lucky enough to have the ingredients for here in Newfoundland and Labrador, while paying down debt, while helping to address the cost of living. And so it's nice now, 3 years in, to be able to look back and see all those challenges that we were facing day one have been dealt with to a certain extent and turned into opportunities and other perspectives. And it's really exciting to see Newfoundland and Labrador so well positioned moving into the future.
And then going back, because when you go back to the book and when you
Yeah.
walked off that plane in Haiti, what faced you was equally as challenging as what faced you when you took the role as
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's
But
stubbornness,
very
but I'm not
different.
afraid of a challenge, that's for sure.
And I was thinking, what did you learn from that experience that you brought to your role now?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I learned that well, first of all, I think, and probably most importantly, that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit and hope that exists within the human spirit will always shine through. There's no disaster, natural or financial or otherwise, that the goodness of people, the hope and the spirit of humanity won't shine through. Sometimes it's hard to see. It may seem very dark, and it may be just a flicker in the corner, but it's that little bit of hope that will get people through tough times. And that was true in Haiti, and it was true arguably 3 or 4 years ago in Newfoundland and Labrador. So that was one lesson to be learned. The other lesson was building on lessons that I had learned at that dinner table is, you see a challenge. You can talk about the challenge, you can argue about the challenge, you can debate the challenge, but you need to get there. You need to take action on the challenge eventually. If you're to legitimize your position and your voice, you need to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. And just seeing that in Haiti and seeing the progress, frankly, I think it would have been a different story for me if we didn't develop relationships and we didn't see progress that was being made, whether that's in Haiti or Nicaragua or Guatemala and the other places that we branched out. I think it would have been a different life lesson, but to be able to see the progress, first of all, in patients and the difference you were making for them individually, but then in terms of systems and structure and changes that you were able to enact on the ground.
That time when you went back and there was a hospital there.
Yeah, we built the hospital.
You built the hospital. And then I noticed you mentioned you had the ambulance, Melly Enterprises. I knew them. And you
oh, in New Brunswick, great family. Yeah.
But how paths intertwine.
Yeah.
And then you were there to see that. And I think you referenced in there at one point, you said, well, we're not like cowboys just jumping in to save the day. You actually made a commitment to go back, and then that's where the foundation came from. That it grew out of that. It grew beyond you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything in the 24-hour news cycle, and perhaps even more truncated now with social media. People pay attention for a little moment. And while the world's attention was directed and captivated by the disaster that happened in the earthquake in Port-au-Prince, I knew that was going to be fleeting, and people would, once the channel changed and there was a new natural disaster, a new political story, then people's attention would be somewhere else. We wanted to make sure that we were not going to just have a one-off kind of, once we started to establish that we would not have a one-off mission, that we would be committed to the people that we were helping to serve. Not just, by the way, in providing medical care, but also in providing structural infrastructure. We built a new hospital, but perhaps more importantly than that is we provided a great deal of education. We started, informally educating nurses, surgeons, doctors, but then we moved to even more formal courses where they were hosted in a hotel, just like anywhere else, with PowerPoint presentations and surgeons and anesthesiologists from all around the world coming in to help educate the Haitian people, and that legacy will live on forever. Presumably they took skills away that once even the infrastructure collapses or is no longer useful, that they're still able to teach people, or people they taught are able to teach others.
Yeah, and you could take that. You took that to Bangladesh.
Yeah, we took it. We were very fortunate to in this journey to grow very quickly. So it was supposed to be one trip, and then it was only supposed to be a couple of trips, and then it was only supposed to be Newfoundland and Labrador. And then the story is that it just kind of leaked out across the country. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who were medical professionals elsewhere had heard about it, and they wanted to kind of do something similar. And in a very short period of time, we grew from, again, one trip to, being in Calgary, being in Vancouver, being in Nova Scotia, being in Toronto, all over the country. And so I needed to figure out, okay, well, this thing is growing so fast, how am I going to put some structure around this, or else it'll collapse under its own weight. And so I decided to do some business courses, and one of the people who I was in class with was a person from Bangladesh. And she ran a non-for-profit there. And she said, well, you're doing all this marvelous work in Port-au-Prince. Why can't you come to Bangladesh? And I said, well, why not? And how hard can it be, right? We'd already done it, probably arguably in the worst place in the world. And so we went to Bangladesh and started to educate people specifically on obstetrics care there, because their birth rate is so high and the population density is so intense. And then we expanded other places, including Ethiopia, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Nepal, all from just one little trip to Port-au-Prince in 2010. Yeah.
It's really amazing, and I think one of the things particularly throughout the book, you brought real people in there.
Yeah.
Like such as Jonathan, and I know it's a while since you've
Yeah.
written.
No, I don't know Jonathan quite well.
Exactly, and I thought the point was that the life of one person matters. It's that first step, I think.
So we, some of the criticisms when we first came back was, because these trips aren't inexpensive, they're not astronomical, but they're not inexpensive. It's essentially the cost of a flight because we stay on site and at one point in little huts and tents. One of the criticisms was, well, isn't that money better spent, giving it to the UN or to UNICEF or some other established organization? It's like, and the counter is, well, we're making direct impact in people's lives. It's not going to go into an organizational bucket and someone's going to decide where or how. If we go down there, these surgeons and anesthesiologists and nurses and everybody are volunteering their time, by the way. They're taking time away from work, using their summer vacations and other things to come and give back, and they make a direct impact in someone's life. And my answer to that was always, if you make the difference in one person's life, then that's the value of the trip. And Jonathan was a great example. We went to an orphanage, and I found it very difficult to go to orphanages. I only went to the one visit, and or actually two in my entire time in Haiti. But the team would go and do medical checks, and one of the nurses spotted an infant who was struggling and had been abandoned on the streets of Port-au-Prince. And the orphanage found them and brought them in, but they were struggling with malnutrition and struggling to breathe, struggling to survive. And so she scooped him up and brought him back to the hospital, and ended up, I think, having a feeding tube put in and things to help be nursed back to health. And then we got this marvelous report 4 or 5 years later that he had been adopted by a family in Houston, Texas. And it's a picture with him getting off the plane with this nice couple in Texas. And hopefully Jonathan has a remarkable life in the U.S. and is able to, at one point, contribute.
Exactly. And I think it's that thing, and actually I just made a note because you talked about pure medicine.
Yeah.
And,
I miss it, by the way.
You miss it. But this is where I saw the connection. You go in, you do pure medicine. This is the situation. This is what we're going to do. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
And then you come here as premier. This is the situation. This is what we're going to do. Let's get it done. I really saw that connection of what you experienced there in that way that you could bring to the province.
Yeah, no, it's so. But for those who would not understand that, I mean, medicine is like any other job. Eventually, it gets somewhat bureaucratic. It gets onerous. Paperwork builds up, and really, that's not the reason why you went into medical school or something. Not why I went in. I wanted to help people. As cheesy as that may sound, that's the reason that I chose to do medicine. And sometimes that bureaucracy takes away from, your inner true north of why you did this, and it just gets deflected. But being able to go down to a place like Haiti and just, okay, there's the problem, there's the patient, now we're gonna fix it, and it may not be how we would normally do it, but this is the path going forward with less bureaucracy was incredibly liberating. And for me as a surgeon, that's the way I'm programmed, is there's your broken femur, this is what we're going to do, and that's how it's going to look after, and that's how we're going to rehab you, and then guess what? Now we're on to the next one, type thing.
Next. And even as well, you made a point in there, not hearing those voices in your head, the ones that say, this is too big, how can we make a difference? And often, did you ever feel that as premier when you first took the role on?
Well, like I said, the challenges were overwhelming at times initially, teetering on bankruptcy. That's never pleasant, no. As a province. And, and then, hearing the pundits on the mainland in particular, wondering if we were going to lose our provincial status. And I remember one mainland reporter, being fairly condescending in the questioning, and so that all felt somewhat dark, I suppose, but made me more determined than ever to reset a path with a new vision and strategy for this place. And we are definitively on it. I mean, I recognize that we have all these opportunities economically and from a natural resource perspective and from a geographic location perspective, but the number one crisis wasn't the financial one, by the way. That was bad enough. The number one crisis is our demographic crisis. Oldest population, lowest fertility rate, incredible strain on the system, the oldest population in the country, the lowest life expectancy, which means, tremendous strain on the healthcare system. And I realized that we're going to have all these opportunities in the green transition, if you will, still in the oil and gas, but also in the green. And if we didn't have people to capitalize on them, it was just going to be a budget exercise, which isn't what I got into this for. I got into this job to help make a difference in people's lives and in communities and more broadly and from a provincial perspective. So at times it felt overwhelming starting, but I always kind of knew that if we come up with a plan, and just like surgery, if you come up with a plan and you stick to it, not everything goes according to plan in surgery either, by the way.
No, it doesn't.
You have to adjust the plan, but the goal is always the same. The goal is always to get the patient rehabbed. The goal is always to get the province rehabbed on a sustainable path forward for, not for me, but for my family in the future.
Yeah. And the aspect of Newfoundlanders that we all know so well is that we all enjoy being here. There's something within us that seems to magnetic, and some go, but they always want to come home. I think in the book you said that you'll always be able to know the Newfoundlanders in heaven. They are the ones who want to go
Asking
home.
St. Peter how you get home.
And I think that, with what you experienced there, I mean, their home being destroyed and just going down and making a difference there, coming back, making a difference here. How did you decide to put this in a book? I mean, this would not be an easy book to write.
No, it was, I tell everybody, this was the hardest thing I've ever done. This was the biggest challenge. It's so I began by writing little blogs. When I started, by the way, I didn't know what a blog was, if it was fit to eat or like it was a fairly new thing.
Yes.
And I had some people helping me set up the charity, and they say, like, you really should do social media and you really should do this. Okay, this sounds like a fad, by the way, but whatever. So I started writing it for that purpose, but then it became more of a diary and more of a emotional catharsis, if you will, during the trip. And the publisher got a hold of some of them and suggested that we kind of put it in the pages of the book. I said, sure. I mean, but I never appreciated how difficult it would be to do, but then to let go, because of course you've read it. It's very personal.
It is.
It leaves me incredibly vulnerable. There's nothing hidden. Like, I admit a lot of my faults, a lot of my fears are all right there in those pages. My family story, which people may or may not have known, is all right there. And so it felt very vulnerable, and consequently is definitively the hardest thing I've ever done. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where it came to mind when I was reading it. Well, who knit you? Because it was. I thought I would never have known. I would never have thought. But I think that out of adversity, and quite often you compared the island of Haiti to the island of Newfoundland.
That's a theme.
The similarities of the two places and the adversities that we faced, and then here we are today. So people can get this book still. I certainly did.
No, good.
Everywhere.
Encourage it. Yeah, the proceeds of which go to Team Broken Earth, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, and here we are. We're in Gander today, and that is nice to know that the proceeds go. But we're also here, and the musical is here, Come From Away, which again is another example of Newfoundlanders in action.
Of course, answering a challenge, not seeing it as overwhelming, and stepping up to help people in need. It's people wonder what the secret sauce is, what that special twinkle is in the eye of every Newfoundlander and Labradorian, and I have to believe it comes from the history of this place and supporting each other during tough times historically. But it's more than history. Somehow in the pages of history, that's been embedded in our DNA, and there is in each of us as Newfoundlanders, there's an overwhelming sense of place and community, and incumbent in that is the want and the need to help people who need that help. And Come From Way is a great example.
A wonderful example, and people are coming from away.
Yeah.
Experience our province. I think tourism must be at an all-time
Peak.
high as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. Well, on target to be above pre-pandemic levels. We have incredible tourism product in our vistas and our landscapes and the ocean and the icebergs and the whales and the storytelling, but the real draw, and of course you know this, and everybody out there knows this, the real thing that anyone you talk to who's been here or who's not from here, that is the drawback, maybe we insert a little magnet in them as well, is the people and the spirit of the people.
And so they say. And we should not forget, I often say Newfoundland through the interview, but
Newfoundland and Labrador.
Newfoundland and Labrador,
Yeah.
a place I've yet to go, but I do want to.
You've never been to the Big Land?
I have not.
Oh, it's
no,
fabulous.
but
Absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, I have to get myself up there. But thank you so much for coming in today. I really appreciate the time and discussing the book, The Hardest Project. Maybe there'll be another book to come out.
Post-premiership.
Yes, absolutely. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, appreciate it very much. And folks, thanks for tuning in to Let's Get Writing, where we tell the stories behind the stories, which are sometimes the best stories. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us.